Hey, so today we are doing the first of what will probably be a three-part series on documentaries that I made last year. The first one that we're going to talk about today is Every Step Forward, about the Cocodona 250 Ultramarathon raced by Sally McRae. So I'm going to go ahead and press play. It's going to be a little bit of a director's commentary. It's going to be a little bit of a making of, and then just kind of answering some frequently asked questions. I'm just going to let the film play along in the background. Oh, especially through this opening scene where I don't know if I want to revisit this whole like foot damage. That becomes a big plot point though in the film. But yeah, this was, so Sally McRae and I met last year, met in 2022. Well, I guess technically now it's 2 years ago, 2022, when I was shooting a project called Choose Strong with her. My good friend Tyler McCain, who I also made this film with, and I were assigned to that project, and we ended up filming 4 races with Sally, and then I had the opportunity to, earlier in 2023, before the making of Every Step Forward, I filmed another race with Sally, and we also filmed 12 YouTube episodes in the lead up to this race. So the Cocodona 250 Ultramarathon is a newer race, but all 200-mile races at this point are pretty new, and this is kind of new for me as well. This would be my first try at this point I'd shot 100K, a couple 100-milers, couple just like long endurance effort style race films, but up until this point hadn't shot a 200-mile race, and so that brings its own different challenges. Like when the race time is going to be in the 80 to 85 hours, you can't just push through a long day on no sleep. You have to figure in breaks to sleep. You have to figure in breaks to stop and cook food and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to break back in here to the film. We're looking at the introduction. We have this cool voiceover from a podcast that Sally did before. I generally tend to gloss over in ultra races the stuff that happens before. Like, it definitely has to fit into an intro sequence, because I don't like to do too much of the jump back and forward in time. Like, obviously we started at like the end of the race, but I don't like to like start with the intro and like miles 1 through 30 and then jump back in time. So we were pretty light on what we shot before. You know, I mean, there's some films that they go into the race expo and like flying in and shopping for groceries, and that's just not something that I feel like it's worth the audience's time. I like to get to the race pretty quickly, and that's evolved. Of course, you know, not everyone has the chance to make 3 of basically the same style films in the same year, but as you'll see in the rest of these, I plan on making a making of for each of these films eventually. My approach evolved towards that, but right about 2.5 minutes in here, under 3 minutes, we're gonna get to the start of the race, and that's pretty efficient, I figure. So yeah, we're walking to the start line here with Sally. This was probably the most stressful. The start line is like both the most simple, but also the most stressful part of filming, because I remember I was shooting on the Canon C70. That was our A camera here that we had rented, because at this point I did not own my Sony FX6, and I tried to swap cameras between what I've been shooting, like the Verite before the race stuff with, that I barely used any of. That was the C70. I tried to switch over to my A7 IV on the gimbal, and I actually ended up losing Sally and barely got her in the start line shot because I lost track of where she was. This is a great shot here that Tyler got. He ended up hiking in about 2 miles. You don't have a chance to scout, especially a 250-mile point-to-point race. You do not have a chance to scout everything. But this was the one part that we did scout. We knew there was a river crossing. We knew that it would be very possible for him to leave, 20 minutes before start time, hike on in, get some shots out there. He flies the drone. That wasn't one, he just threw up the drone and kind of flew over, guessing. He was pretty far away, and so it was like guess and hope that was Sally in the shot, and it is. It's great. I used a little bit of live stream there because we couldn't see her for the first 30 miles. That's another one of the challenges, right, with these races, is that like, because you can't scout, you don't necessarily know how much of the course you're going to be able to cover. And Cocodona was pretty straightforward in terms of what we could and couldn't get to. This one did have a good amount of hiking. Like here, we ended up hiking into an aid station. I want to say it was probably like 4-ish miles. That was pretty much all uphill, but we hiked in to cover that. That was because those first roughly 30 miles were inaccessible. If we'd had all the time in the world and scouted out and have 2 crews or a 4x4, but it's just Tyler and I kind of rolling together the whole time. And so we ended up at Crown King. That was kind of our first base of operations, along with the crew, along with Sally. And so then we came into the aid station. This was where we got introduced to what would become a theme throughout the year was issues that Sally was having with her feet. And I'm not going to talk about it too much because it's been talked to death. And I know she's tired of the comments and the questions and every single person having an opinion. But narratively, it's very important. And so that's just like one of those things that it's also one of those funny things with having established this relationship with Sally. I think this film would look a lot different if we were just a crew that was hired and brought in. And I'll talk about the client in a minute here. But if we were just a crew that was like hired and brought in, like we met the day before race day, because we had filmed with Sally so much, because we had met Eddie and hung out with him, her husband, who's her crew chief. We met both of them. We traveled to Switzerland with them, and we've been over to their house and all this kind of stuff. So we're friends. We're cool. Like, I don't think that opening shot, for example, right? That hotel room after the race, like, I don't know if that door is open to every single crew. Just like some of the stuff that we shoot, like up close and personal, and some of the stuff that we show off in the edit, up close and personal with like what she's going through. I don't know if we get that access without being as close and having that great relationship that we've had the opportunity to develop with Sally and with Eddie. I mean, they're genuinely just friends at this point. And so that's been really cool to watch that grow. And, it's just fun to adventure with friends. At the end of the day, that's what it is. All right, I'm going to pause here.
I'm not feeling good. And
A little bit of an afternoon Red Bull here. Sorry, Mom. I said I would quit. It's 2024. Still haven't quit, but we're doing sugar-free. Sugar-free, that's better for you, I guess. I don't know.
My feet really hurting, and I hated that.
So this was another section here that we did not have good access to. I think we could have gotten on. It was one of those, because this early part was a little hard to access, because we haven't had the time to fully scout it beforehand. You don't want to get in a situation where you drive an hour and a half out of your way and you figure out, oh, this isn't going to work. Or we're out of service and we can't tell if she's passed us or not. And if she passes us, we're not going to be able to make it to the next aid station. Now, I hate making a film that's like just hops from aid station to aid station to aid station, especially when you're in these epic places. The Cocodona course has some incredible views. And I love Arizona. I love Northern Arizona. It's so cool. And I wanted to do as much other stuff outside of aid stations as possible. But this was, again, a section where like we had to play it safe because we're only one crew. This would all be so much simpler if you're two crews and you're split up, but only being one crew really made it. We have to play it safe. We can't afford to miss big checkpoints, big aid stations. This is night number 1. Like, these are all important things that we have to cover. So at this point, we'll talk about who kind of helped make this happen, and that was our good friends at CamelBak. CamelBak has been a long time sponsor with Sally. That's one of the brand partners that supports her, and so for this film, they actually came on as the title sponsor, as the only sponsor for the film, which was super exciting, and they were amazing to work with. This was like, it was not an insignificant amount of money that they gave us to make this film. Like, I'm not saying that we were working on the biggest budget or the most comfortable budget, but like, it was not insignificant, but they were very hands-off throughout the process. Like, we did line out what our deliverables were. We had the very clear film deliverable, which actually got to live on Sally's YouTube channel, which is really cool. And then we had a little bit of short form content that we were doing, but they weren't super heavy handed with that, giving me a style guide or like very specific messaging that we had to hit. And then there was also photos, but again, that was like pretty loose and pretty general. And it wasn't just like the most glossy magazine style photos, which works really well for these races because, and I guess we can talk a little bit about too, the philosophy behind shooting this style of documentary and how that differs. Even though it's branded, how does it differ from shooting a commercial? And this is like definitely something you have to wrap your head around in long format too. Like, we walked in and we knew that this was going to be over 25 minutes. Like, it was definitely going to be over 25 minutes. I guess the final run time is 48 minutes. That's probably longer than I would have thought that it would have run from the beginning. But again, I didn't know. I'd never shot a 200-mile race before. Obviously, we're out there for a while. Oh, this is a cool shot of summer. I need to talk about the audio, too. I have so many different things that I want to talk about over the course of this film. But going back, so what's our philosophy of shooting? And in my mind, what I've kind of developed is like the coverage philosophy. Because if we were out there to shoot just a reel, if we were out there to shoot a 2-minute brand video, that is going to look very different from, I want to be able to cover basically the entire length of the film if I have to. Like, don't show any, let's say I mess up all the interview shots, and I can't use the interview shots. I want to be able to cover the length of the film with race footage. And so that means that when we hike in somewhere, yes, maybe we get there and it's like, this doesn't look as good as we thought it would. Or she's surrounded by a couple other people and it makes the shots a little bit more challenging. We still have to shoot. We still have to get the footage there, because what matters is that we're covering a certain amount of time in the film and that we're illustrating what there is. We're illustrating really what it is that is going on. That's also my philosophy when it comes to, we use GoPro footage in this film. We use GoPro footage at night that doesn't look good. We cut away to the live stream once or twice. And that's all just a part of my philosophy of I would rather show the race than show an interview shot most of the time. I probably could stand to cut in the interview shot a couple more times. And I think I've worked through that over the next 2 films. But especially when we're in these cool places, even here in downtown Prescott, we're on Whiskey Row. It's neat. It's sunrise. Everything looks pretty cool. I would rather show more of that, or OTF interviews, on the fly interviews, sure. Those you need to see just to kind of ground you in that it's in the moment. But it's important to me to shoot in a coverage mindset and not like a commercial. We hiked all the way in and the light wasn't right, and so therefore we're just not going to shoot. That doesn't really work for long form content in the way, a long form documentary in the way that I prefer to make it. So at this point, it's important to talk about how do we kind of make this happen in a logistics perspective. So we are obviously out there for multiple days. At this point, we've gone through the first night. I remember that first night. So this was us just sort of figuring it out. We had a full-size SUV, which most of the back was taken up by our gear. I did have enough room for a sleeping mat. And so I was able to lie down in the back of the car and sleep. I'm on a yoga mat. And, one of the things that we didn't factor in, this was all pretty rushed. One of the things we didn't factor in is that, it was going to get pretty cold, especially as we got further north. We went up in elevation here in Arizona. That was definitely going to become a real issue, was how cold it was going to be. But yeah, night 1, I remember pulling off outside of the aid station, just a random side of the road kind of spot, and crashing for 2 or 3 hours. You're always I'm always constantly worried that we're missing something. And so I never really sleep for more than 2 or 3 hours at a time. There were multiple times where I think even during this one, and definitely during the next 2 or 3 projects that we've done, that I will set alarms every 2 hours. And yeah, it's uncomfortable. If you have 4 hours probably to sleep, it's uncomfortable to wake up 2 hours in, but I'll wake up 2 hours in, check a tracker or something like that. Luckily, these big races have great tracking. Cocodona had spot trackers, which are very straightforward to follow as long as you have cell service. They're you can't trust them down to the minute, but it gives you a really good idea of, okay, is it time to get up and move and go, or do I have multiple hours still to go? So this one, we definitely failed in our sleep approach, though. It just did not work to have one sleeping mat for 2 people. And plus, Tyler's a taller guy. That was not going to work for him to lie down in the back. And so eventually, I think it was on night 3, we ended up just pulling off to the side of the road, getting a motel, because I don't think had really slept at that point. And I had slept, maybe 4 to 6 hours in the first 2 days. Plus, you just kind of sit and close your eyes every once in a while. But, and then the challenge is okay, sometimes you hit the perfect time to stop and take a nap, but you don't have service to check the tracker. It's all sort of a game. And that's definitely the challenge with only one crew and shooting for long format. Again, if we were shooting for short format, yeah, every night we could probably have gone and slept for 5 or 6 hours. Just no problem. It actually wouldn't have been too hard, given that once you get past the first 60 miles of the Cocodona course, you're hopping along the interstate. You could hop from town to town to town, stay motels, whatever. But we came in underprepared for how hard it was going to be. I think we also definitely assumed that the race was going to be just a little shorter than it was. And I think Sally did too. You know, neither of us could have anticipated the foot issues being as bad as they were and slowing her down as much as they did. So then you have this section here. Like, this is great because it's like so easily accessible. We're just shooting off the side of the road. And then again, we fill it in with GoPro because this is a section that we couldn't really get to, and it's better to fill it in with GoPro footage than it is to not show anything at all. This was a really nice aid station. I do remember we were able to sleep for 2 or 3 hours while waiting for them to make the climb up to Mingus Mountain, just because we had service there, and so we could be checking the tracker, and it was like warm, middle of the day. Funny thing, so I remember I got dropped off the road probably like a mile out of the aid station, and I was flying the drone, and then they just kind of like appeared. Like, it was like they snuck up on me. They got there faster than I thought. I flew the drone for a little bit, and then I packed the drone down into my bag, and I have the C-70, and so I just started running after them, and then I ended up, I was like a little too far behind because it took me too long to put the drone down, and so then a couple comes up behind me in a Subaru, and I like waved them down, and I was like, "Are you guys going up to the aid station?" I said, "Yeah." I said, like, "Hey, can I hop in for literally like half a mile?" And they gave me a ride. So sometimes you make it work. The legend has kind of expanded as the more races that I've filmed. Is like, how far do you run? Like, oh, it's a 200-mile race. Like, you must run at least 100 miles. Like, we definitely put in some serious miles. A lot of it is hiking to get to spots. It's not really just like we are running the whole time. But I'm also not against taking shortcuts, especially because, like, yes, you're putting not too hard of miles on your legs, but like, especially because you're not eating super well, you're not drinking a lot. Those are just not good recipes for putting in a lot of miles and then recovering and feeling pretty good about it. Here you can see, I see a lot of these shots and I'm like, wow, like I see all the issues with the C-70. That was just not a good camera to choose, but that was what made sense budget-wise. You know, we had some Canon lenses already that we could make work. But that was kind of our setup here, was the Canon C-70, my own drone, the DJI Mini 3 Pro, and we have the GoPro, obviously, and then the A7 Mark IV, which was, that's my personal camera. We did a little bit of photo on that as well as some video, and then Tyler's Canon R5. So really a mix of all sorts of different cameras. There's a good amount of gimbal stuff in here as well. Again, like how I've chosen to shoot these has evolved over time, but those are just some of the technical details. I think one of the things I was most unimpressed by from this was the audio, like the length of time we were shooting, and because of the cameras we were using. And I don't want to blame the tools, but I was trying some different mics out on the A7 IV, and that audio was just awful. The GoPro audio is fine. The Canon C70 audio was fine. I think that I hadn't, just because like I picked it up 2 days before we started shooting this entire film, I just hadn't had the time to dial in exactly how I wanted to do audio like I have with my FX6. Now I know exactly how I want to run the FX6 for this kind of project, but yeah. And then the C70 wasn't great at low light. Anyway, that's a bunch of the technical stuff to patch up the audio though, and this is what I will talk about. And again, I'm gonna chapter this whole video for sure. So if you are here for the technical stuff, amazing. If you are just here for funny Sally McRae stories, hey, we'll get to that. There are some good ones for sure from this film. But yeah, the technical stuff. So this is around the point where I discovered Adobe's podcast AI, the enhanced speech that's now, I believe it's now built into the latest update of Premiere, but that saved this project. I think I was a little heavy-handed on it. Looking back, like I can really just hear that like, wow, you were really using that on everything, but that definitely saved this project. It saved this film in terms of, because the audio is so important for these documentaries, and like, I didn't want to have to caption so much different stuff. Like there are always going to be moments you have to caption, but I didn't want to caption way too much stuff.
want to throw the goal.
Yeah, so here in this scene, like you can tell it's just a little dark because the C70 and even the A74 for that matter just don't really play super well in low light. Filming the night stuff is always a challenge because, and here, I mean, you do see some interesting stuff because like you can see the lights of Jerome in the background. Man, I would have loved to have shot this in the day. Like that would have been cool. But that's right. That's a challenge of putting together these different projects is you can put as many different spots on the map as you want. And this is what I've learned with a 200-mile race or 200-mile project is that you just have to pick as many spots as possible that you can get to, that are accessible, that look good, all these kind of different things. And then you're going to have to pivot no matter what because you don't know when your athlete is going to hit these different spots. What time of day? Are they going to stop and take a nap at a certain point that you didn't plan for? Okay, that throws our whole schedule off by an hour. You really have to be ready to improvise. This is a funny one, is that like we drove along with Sally for a lot of this section, just shooting out of the window, and she's just like talking away, having a great time. This is where the whole pass gap and bury phrase, which Tyler and I were cracking up in the car. I think you can actually hear me laugh at some point because she was just like she was so in race mode. Like this was definitely a good moment for her because she was making progress, passing people, and running on the road. I think at this point was just a nice change of pace from like a lot of uphill or a lot of downhill. It was kind of just like you could just cruise along. You know, we come into all sorts of odd little aid stations, which I wonder what they look like in the day. Again, you never know. When you come in the dark, you can't really see. I remember this one, they were like, this explains some of how these aid stations are cut. I cut the aid stations pretty aggressively. I cut them pretty short. I think that's definitely something that as a viewer of a lot of ultra content, like I get that there are some races that like a Western States where it's so fast and the course is so hard to get around that like, yeah, you're gonna have to show more aid station stuff because that's most of the time all that you can really get. But like here, for example, the reason I cut that aid station short is they're just watching a movie. Like the aid station has like a projector and a movie playing, which I get. If you're gonna be out there for like 2 days and doing an overnight shift, yeah, play movies. But it's like, well, I can't use this because one, we want to monetize the YouTube video, and two, like, yes, our sponsors are pretty light-handed, but like, I don't know if they'd want to see copyrighted content. So this is where we kind of just happened into a lucky moment. So at night aid station, that was where we left, and we right away went to a motel, checked in, went to sleep, and I woke up a little bit before sunrise, if I remember right, and drove out. I mean, the nice thing about this course, very accessible to just like drive along highways and stuff, because this aid station is right off of a highway. And I got there just in time, basically, to shoot a little bit of sunrise, and she'd end up taking a nap. We had thought that she would sleep here, and so that's why one of the reasons why we were like, okay, it's probably okay to take our own nap, for lack of a better way of putting it. And we were able to get there, and like I got there maybe with 10 minutes to spare before things were gonna get up and get going again. So again, in and out of the aid station, I'm cutting it pretty fast. Again, it's the same way that the race, right? Is that like at races, when you have this many aid stations in a 250-mile race, you know, it's like, let's say we have 15 aid stations or something like that. If you take an extra couple of minutes as a runner, that makes your race that much longer. You know, an extra 2 minutes at 15 aid stations, or an extra 3 minutes at 15 aid stations is an extra hour. If I took an extra 30 seconds at every aid station in the film, that makes the film just that much longer. And to be honest, it's about, when I approach cutting together an aid station scene, it is about what is the most important plot point or plot points from this aid station to illustrate. That's like my first level, is all the conversation can be interesting, but like what's the most important? And here it's generally about sleep, or it's about the condition of her feet. Those are the two most important things. The second layer is like, do we need to introduce a pacer character, that kind of thing. This is a drone shot where I was flying. It was beautiful, and I had gone out with them about half a mile, 3/4 of a mile out of the aid station, came running back to the aid station, put up the drone, could not find them. That was that's always the tricky part. So I was alone at this point. Tyler was still back at the hotel, and that is a tricky part with these. Is that like, yeah, once you are on your own. Oh, I should have carried the drone on my back. I was not prepared for that. Things were just moving a little too fast. So that's just stuff that gets lost when you're shooting solo, and those are the things that just happen. But anyway, yeah, back to the aid station kind of thought. If you're adding that extra time onto stuff that distracts from the central story, like the central conflicts, that's a great GoPro shot, by the way. 100 miles to go. Those are the moments where, and I'm trying to get better about like trying to work with pacers and not interfere with the way that they obviously have a job to do, which is find the route, keep the person safe, keep the person moving. But that's a really good GoPro shot. So there you go. We are coming into Sedona. This was a good little spot where we were able to get away from an aid station. This was, it makes it look like we're further in the middle of nowhere than we were. Like that was also like right off a road. And I think we did half a mile, quarter mile with Sally. Then we're into the next aid station there. And at this point, it's fun to be back in civilization in Sedona. I love Sedona. I love Northern Arizona. Like this is the coolest race. Like I think if you were to do a 200-mile race, which I don't know if I ever would, but like if you're an athlete looking to do a race, like, oh my gosh, Cocodona is amazing. So yeah, then you get to like some of the less pretty stuff though, where it's like filming along to the side of the road, but we're committed to showing the race for what it is. We're not here making a tourism video necessarily, you know, but, so then this is probably, I want to see the hour marker here on Sedona in terms of where we were in the race. I remember this being, every sunrise just kind of like brings you back to life a little bit, but I remember coming back to life a little bit on this one for sure. Just because it's sunny, it's warm, we're in a beautiful place. Yeah, we were having a good time. Like Sally eating a burger here, which yielded one of probably my favorite photos, which I think made Sally's Instagram during the race, of her just like chowing down on a burger. Here you see, yeah, I'm captioning stuff when, again, like aid stations, like they're listening to loud music and there's a lot of stuff going on. But I actually I needed that line at that point to show where we're going next, which is her going to sleep in these sleep stations, which, you know, that was a thought that I had at some point, was like, oh man, could we be sleeping at these sleep stations? Look at all these cots. It's kind of most of my thoughts towards this like back half of the race generally revolved around sleep. This you can definitely see, like, I do have this, even though, you know, get along with Sally and she's given us full access, like, I don't get way uncomfortably close. And I think that some of that is like, I do want to preserve the experience, because I know in like a dark room, she's sleep deprived. She's kind of like, I mean, we're all losing our mind a little bit. I think she's a little bit in and out of it. And I would rather stay a little further away, because I don't think that she really registers that I'm there on some of these occasions. And that to me is important, is that like, we want to preserve the experience for the runner. And, you know, I'll also talk about at this point, like I'm talking about being on course at different points. What's important to me about that, one, like we did this with full permission of the race director. We talked to Jamil beforehand. Jamil's amazing. He was like in full support of us being out there and filming. We're not the only film crew that's out there filming. And of course they have their own race photographers. They're doing an incredible live stream. Our Vibe puts on great races. But with these races, you know, the overarching rule is like, don't provide aid to a runner. Typically, providing aid to a runner, right, is like giving them food, giving them water. If they say, I don't want to carry my poles anymore, dropping their poles, like these are things that you can't do as a member of the media, and that like you couldn't do as crew outside of a crewed aid station. And another one that, well, this one comes and goes, but like, do you give them time splits of how far in front or how far behind? I take it to the point of, and this is just something that I've set personally for a rule of mine. I don't think it happened at Cocodona, but it's happened at some of the other races I filmed with Sally. Like, I don't tell an athlete when they are going off course. I have watched Sally go off course. a couple of times. Like they've never been serious. And I don't know if like I were to stand in one place knowing that I could see the next marker like at the top of the hill and she just disappears from view. I don't know what I would do if it was like, oh, she's gonna go a mile or 2 miles off course. I don't know what I would do. But like a lot of the, like I don't, as soon as I see her take a wrong step, be like, hey, no, this is the right way. Just cause like that, is anyone else out there getting that kind of aid? I don't know. And with Cocodona too, right, with any of these races this year that we filmed, you know, last year the project was all about Sally just getting to the finish line she set a bunch of really hard challenges really close together. She was very clear up front. It's like, this is just about me finishing. Yes, I'm a professional athlete, but like in many ways, this is going to be like a normal runner experience for me of just trying to finish. But here, you know, she's entered as an elite professional athlete who has aspirations of podium finishes eventually. Obviously, Cocodona did not necessarily go her way, and this was kind of a learning race in the course of the 4 200-mile races she was taking on. But like that puts an extra pressure, I think, on us as a media team not to interfere, not to get in the way, and to be extra respectful too of other athletes who are out there as well. I would never want to get in the way of another athlete. I would never want to, even if like male or female, competitive or not, like the athlete comes first, and preserving the athlete's experience comes first. And if that means that I miss a shot, like we missed her going up Hope Pass at the Leadville 100 trail run in 2022. And some of that was, I mean, sometimes you miss time things, but like some of that was also, I think we stopped 4 or 5 times on the final climb up to let other runners come by because they're in the race. And I need to get my shot, but it is more important that that athlete who is in the race is getting the experience that they want. Yes, it's a public hiking trail or whatever, you know, but it's more important to me that the athletes get the experience that they want. Now we're coming into this aid station here, which has some of my favorite shots. Like the light was really just hitting through the pine trees, and man, Sally was working so hard for this movement, which like looks kind of odd on the gimbal, to be honest. But it has this like interesting like floaty perspective. And then you can see we were doing this thing where like, yeah, like I would go out with the gimbal and then I would run it back in, and then Tyler's there with the bigger camera. And I think we did a handoff at this point at Schnebley Hill aid station. This one for sure. So yeah, we're 60 hours in. Things are getting rough, and I distinctly remember this one because Sally came in and she's like talking with Eddie, as they almost always do, and like I've seen her at this point. I've seen her go through plenty of rough stuff. I know that she's hurting here, like, and I know that it's been bad. Like we've been talking about it for 50 of the 60 hours, but it's really tough when like I remember her crying at this aid station, and there's not like a great like it wasn't just like a fountain of tears, like total breakdown, but like it was bad. And that's one of the harder moments as a filmmaker for sure, because like when it's your friend, when it's somebody who you care for, and all you want to do is like be a human in that moment and not be a camera. And so there is some of that. Like we are not always just like pushing the camera up closer, get in the space. Like we don't want you to have a quiet moment. But like, again, we don't really talk a whole lot. In the aid station, we definitely, I have no problem with like talking with Sally or whatever, because, you know, for that, all intents and purposes, we're crew with cameras at that point. We're just like any other crew member. But yeah, it's just tough. And like I remember, yeah, on this shot, like I pulled back behind the door because she kept looking up at me, and I could tell that she like wanted a quiet moment. Same here with like where I'm positioned, like shooting through. There's like the sun behind me and that kind of stuff, and like I figured she wouldn't be able to see me as well, because like especially when you're going through like awful stuff, like I want her to be able to process it without necessarily feeling the pressure of being on camera. And she's so good at that. She is so good at this. Sally is amazing to have on camera. And I also think that in these races, just because, I mean, she's been in the sport for 10 years. She's had plenty of camera crews around her, all sorts of different things that, like, I think she's pretty good at not really worrying about what the camera is looking at or what parts of things the camera is seeing. And, you know, at this point, I've also developed with her a relationship of like, hey, we're just going to shoot everything. And like, if we have to take something out, we have to take something out. And like, that's fine. And nobody will ever see it. But like, please just let us shoot everything. And then we'll worry about it later. And that generally works pretty well. This is the launch of the green machine. Sally is like basketball warm-up suit that's fully green. That kind of became a staple in the films this year. I don't think any of us realized how iconic it was going to be, but it is. This one's a good look for sure. And yeah, so we're 60 hours in. We're 35 minutes into the film. So actually you'll see like the time is compressed towards the back half, which is always seems to happen, but like the next 25 miles is going to be shorter than, well, the first 25 miles just kind of fly by. But because of that intro sequence, we are going to accelerate pretty quickly here into the end as Sally heads off there.
You gotta pull it together and
into the dark. This was a tough one because it was like, oh, the light has faded just a little too much. Again, getting back to like, we never have control of what all is happening in terms of when is she gonna leave, what time of day. Man, if this had been 30 minutes earlier, light would have been unbelievably good. And so instead we're left with very blue hour. I mean, I flew the drone, I found them. That's like pushing the drone to the limit. You can see the GoPro's like trying to figure out how to balance the exposure. We're cutting a little bit of multicam style there.
I think in ultrasound, you get these opportunities to
Yeah, Bryce did a great job running the GoPro. All the pacers did a great job running the GoPro. I'm just so thankful for any amount of footage that we can get when we're not there. Like this section we looked at and we drove a good amount of. We drove a couple miles, but then it just got like too tight, too tough. So now we're coming in here. Oh yeah, we have a sunset, and I think the next aid station is somewhere in the 70-ish hour mark. I think this is a good point, as good a point as any to talk about what the delivery schedule was for this film and how aggressive that delivery schedule was. So we came into this, I think I came in, 2 days before we flew out, and I'm okay at this point sharing the story, 2 days before we flew out, I quit my job. In some ways to go do this film, but in a lot of ways, this film was just a small part of that decision. So 2 days before that, I quit my job. So I was fully freelance at this point, and I had nothing else really lined up after this project. And so I had in my head, I was like, oh, it'd be fun to get it done pretty quickly, to turn it around pretty quickly. I think I thought it was going to be easier. Oh, here you can see the camera flash from one of my favorite shots that Tyler got the entire race. Gosh, I just love like funny oddities, which is like, she just like crawls in and I think she just passes out right away in the back of the truck. But anyway, so I wanted to do a pretty quick turnaround, and then we got there and there were 2 other crews. So you could see at this aid station, you could see a bunch of lights. That's another film crew. So there were 2 other crews there that I knew. One I knew was filming long form. The other I thought was filming long form. One of those films I've seen. The other I have not. I know both the athletes involved in those situations, but like when I saw that, and this is probably toxic behavior, but like I'm a little competitive. Like I had the thought in my mind of like, man, if there are going to be 3 Cocodona 250 films this year, like crew production films, people who like just like shoot the whole thing on a GoPro, and there's like a 7-hour one from Cocodona that's all GoPro. That's the cool thing about ultrarunning is that like people will just like make and watch. I think it has like 80,000 views of like 7 hours of GoPro footage, and that's an awesome deliverable. So those people, that style of editor might beat me even if I delivered 2 weeks later. Like who knows, that person may just like take a couple extra days off after, throw their GoPro footage in a timeline, export it up on YouTube, they win the race. But I was like, man, there are a couple of other people who are making films. Wouldn't it be cool if I could be the first one to finish? and I knew I was controlling the edit. At this point, I wasn't sure how much CamelBak needed to be involved, but I figured out pretty quickly after the project that like they were going to be very flexible. They're going to be pretty easygoing on the reviews and that kind of stuff. So we sprinted to the finish. I think if I can scroll down and look at the delivery date here, May 31st, 2023. And the race wrapped up on the 5th, the 4th. So less than a month from finish line to delivery of the film. And I have a few thoughts on that. One, now that I've gotten more into the ultra running, the running industry, especially the branded content documentary industry, it's crazy. That's a crazy fast timeline. And especially being a solo, well, a team of 2 shooting it, and then a solo editor who is also one of the team of 2 shooting it. Oh, another beautiful light scene. Anyway, we're at 40:52 here for reference. We're coming down to the close of things as we come into Flagstaff. But yeah, that's a crazy fast timeline to turn it around. Less than a month from the finish line to I don't like to throw around the feature length word because I feel like that's super clicky and that's super just like you're trying to hype yourself up. But I don't know where you would draw the line. If you draw it at like the Academy, like 45-minute thing, but I call it a short feature. It's 48 minutes. That's a very aggressive timeline. And so, but I will also say with that, like I'm not saying that my best work was made within that timeline. I think I batted above average for the quality of the film. But a lot of that is also due to the production. I think that the production was really solid. I batted above average for the quality of the film, given the delivery timeline. And we ended up, I think we made it by just about a week ahead of the other film. So the other team that was editing at the same time, they were crushing it. They were killing it. Props to them. I don't actually know those guys who made Chad Wright's film, but they moved equally as fast. I think they made a longer film, and they released it just a couple days after we released this one. But yeah, we ended up, spoiler alert, we tweaked that a little bit for the next 2 races where it was like a little bit less of a rush to get it done. I don't even know why I rushed this so much, but it ended up paying off to be the first of multiple long form pieces to come out about this race. This aid station here, oh man, I remember it being so cold. We were sleeping there. Eddie was sleeping in his car, and I remember waking up and like my core was so warm and everything else was freezing. Because I think it got down below freezing that night, which was just wild. This is a cool shot. The American Airlines jet in the background. Man, I wish we could have been out there shooting that. And if I shoot this race again, that's the cool thing, is that like this is the first time we're shooting this race. This is the first time that this course is mostly the same way that it had been, I think, the first year. But you never quite know, especially with these long races, like sometimes the course changes every single year. So you never quite know exactly what the different spots are going to be on the race. The interview shot brings up a good point too, is that the interview, I want to say I did that about a week after the fact with Sally. Maybe it was 10 days, but actually Eddie ended up filming that for me. They were back home in Huntington Beach. I was back at my home base in Austin, Texas. And so it just worked out to give her a little bit of separation, because I think that they left the day after the race. Like they left pretty quickly afterwards. And so it didn't really make sense. We did a post-race, so you'll see one shot of her sitting, and there's, I think it's Mount ELDEN in the background. And we did that one the morning after. She finished late at night, early in the morning. She finished the race, and then yeah, we ended up doing that the next morning. But I think that was my introduction to like, oh yeah, sleep deprivation really, really does some damage. And so I just don't think we got the best quality out of that interview. It's good for like the raw reactions to interview really close to the end of the race. But for like the big overarching recap, let's go aid station by aid station, it was probably an hour or 2 hours with some stop-start record time, but we just hopped on FaceTime. And that was how we ended up doing it, which I think worked really well. And then we would use that technique again for the Tahoe film a couple of months later. That works really well, just giving the athlete some space to process too about what it means. Again, like the raw reaction in the moment can be really good at the finish line or the next morning. But especially for long form, you can't depend on like a raw in the moment reaction to like really carry the whole film. And that's what that extra week allowed Sally, I think, to like sit with it, think about what the race had meant and what she was taking away. And then we were able to hit that recap interview with a really focused and directed purpose. This was probably my favorite spot that we filmed at, up at the top of Mount Eldon. I'd never been up there before. I've been to Flagstaff a couple of times, but this was rad. So what we ended up being able to do through one of the race directors was we got access to the fire road that drives up. We didn't end up going all the way because they'd said like, oh, there's some washout, that kind of thing. Ended up not being really a big deal. So I think we made it about halfway up in the car, and then we just hiked the rest, but we gave ourselves plenty of time. And this, like the light, again, light's hitting perfectly here. This might be the only aid station that we shot, but we cut out entirely. There was an aid station here, but like that last aid station is so close to the end of the race that I was like, this is just gonna slow us down. Love that like Pete's Meats is there. He's like making this awesome food and everything. It's a cool moment. Yeah, and then we went running with a full moon, and then we're back into the town, and then the finish line shot, which went a little bit viral in the ultra community, which no one saw. Man, and I get emotional looking at that shot every time, just because like I know what that meant for Sally, and I know what that meant for me to be there, and for Tyler. I don't love my camera work, but honestly, it's the best you could do with like a unbelievable surprise. Like, we had no idea that was gonna happen. Like, I had just run about half a mile with her, and like she's moving because she wants to, like run across the finish line. She's not gonna just walk it in. The sprint and the jump was just like craziness on the gimbal. And then I got this shot from her, the slow-mo, and you can see in her face like how rough that is. And then, yeah, 87 hours to the finish line. So we're shooting the production, essentially 87 hours and 48 minutes. And if you count that we're in their hotel room an hour before the race, we're at 88 hours, and we're in the hotel room an hour after the race. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, 10 days later, there you go. Huntington Beach. We're back, and I kind of threw this together at the end. Like, I'm not sure if it's going to age super well, but the ending's a lot of fun, and I knew we had other films to come at this point. So when we were making this, like, didn't really know what was going to be next, but at this point, I knew we were at least going to make one more film. There you can see, having fun with Eddie, doing some product placement. But there you go. That is Every Step Forward, a trail running adventure film by myself and Tyler McCain. Our debut in the short feature 200-mile documentary world. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for almost an hour. I hope that you enjoyed it, that this gave you some good insights. Again, it's going to be chaptered for your convenience. And, well, I'll see you back here eventually to talk about Racing Tahoe.
All right, Drew, do your magic.